You're not going to let them see you in the bottom thumbnail?
It won't let me share my video while we're presenting right now.
Okay.
All right. So good morning. We are now recording this session. I'm Major McEwen. I'll be working with Major Longfellow and discussing tactical mission planning as it regards to how the Air Force does some business to get us ready to handle operations. It's important to note that this is the lower level of training that we as individuals can be a part of. There are additional levels that stack above it that lead into it. And it's important for us to understand that, because as we start to develop plans and courses of action for operations, we need to know how that system works. So in our briefing today, we're going to talk about what is U.S. Air Force planning, how it works. We'll also discuss the tactical mission planning aspects, and then we're going to put it all together at the end to give us a foundational knowledge of what goes on behind the scenes and how to set ourselves up for success when we are ultimately planning a tactical operation. This is the U.S. Air Force planning process. This is the Joint Mission Planning System, commonly called JUMPS. As you can see, multiple different agencies, multiple different weapon systems, space, air, ground intelligence. But what we really want to concern is where we fit in. We fit in currently at the tactical mission level at the unit level mission planning organization. With that said, a quick overview of our levels of planning. We have our strategic, our operational, and our tactical. Strategic level of planning is typically done at the strategic level, involving the National Security Council, the President, advisors, the National Military Strategy, looking at Air Force and joint military doctrine. And all of these come together to develop what are called operational plans, or O plans. These O plans are war plan documents that can be used in the event a conflict or a scenario occurs anywhere around the world.
So, Major McEwen, you're saying that there are leaders who are busy actually planning for conflict with countries that we're not actually engaged with right now, but in the event things kick off, there's a whole bunch of how we would engage in war is already planned?
That is correct. These operational plans are typically held at the classified level. War planners will look at the scenarios and play war games, much like what we will do later in this course, to develop and think, how would we act with specific resources, or how would our enemy act to specific resources based on a scenario? And they're there so that in the event a situation happens, they can quickly go to this file, pull it out, dust off the dust, look at it, and say, all right, here's our basic plan. What do we need to update for the current situation? What assumptions have changed from our war plan that we can now apply to start developing our operational level, our operation orders, and our frag orders?
So as a country's culture may change, or their technology may change, or their resources or availability or whatever in dime might change for them, we're also taking that into consideration fairly frequently when we look at these O plans to keep them almost up to date, not quite dusty, right?
Absolutely.
Cool.
So moving on to our operational plans, you have your combatant commanders, as well as the Combined Air Operations Centers, the CAOCs, the Joint Centers. What they will do is they will take an operation plan when a scenario kicks off and evaluate it, and then they will then look at the target sets, look at what are the mission requirements, what are the national interests that they're wanting to make sure that we address, and they will develop what are called operation orders and fragmentary orders, op ords and frag orders, sometimes called fragos. These orders are now taking that plan and starting to break up to meet, well, what are our objectives? What are we trying to accomplish? And what's the basic plan of what do we think we might need to accomplish to do so?
So, sir, I think you're going to talk about it in a few slides, but this is like where they're deciding what are our most advantageous targets to get whatever the effect is, right? At this operational level. So target tasking is kind of being started in this area.
You are correct. And that is we will cover that in a few slides. So what will happen is at the operational level, as they decipher these war plans, these O plans, when they develop their orders, they'll pass them down into an air tasking order. And that's what we'll focus on as the Air Force. What we are looking at is executing an air tasking order using our resources. And that's where the tactical level comes in. Our field units, our combat assets are going to be carrying out an air tasking order that would have been planned at an operational level and will be disseminated and looking to go from there. This too includes force packaging, so collecting different aircraft capabilities and putting them together to meet an effect of that op order from the operational level. Additionally, you might also see this is where unit sortie and mission schedules will come in. Who am I specifically tasking to accomplish a task in support of our operational order and war plan? Which, with that baseline understanding, we go into looking at some of the strategic level planning tools. And this is where we start off up at the top is a center of gravity analysis via Warden's rings. Colonel Warden built this model to help reach what he called the physical paralysis of an enemy force. In essence, what target will cause my enemy's force to not react or not continue the fight? How do I cause them to freeze up? Now, this started to give us that why are specific targets being selected. It's because we wanted to hit a desired effect. So it may be that national interest, national objective. It may be what we'll discuss again here shortly about effects-based. Looking at Warden's rings, you can see that the leadership is at the center, because if you took out the leadership, you would expect to see paralysis of your enemy force, because who's in charge now? A vacuum of power would develop. With that said, when we look at effects-based operation, this is now starting to serve as a link between strategic and operational. It is starting to look at, well, how do I plan a operation to meet that objective? Well, is there an easier way of doing things? I like to work smarter, not harder. How can I use what resources I have to make the most impact? If we look at Warden's rings and we see that we need to get in to disrupt an enemy air defense system, rather than going and spending a missile on each individual site using multiple fighters, multiple bombers, if I can find a communications hub that is vulnerable, that would disrupt this enemy air defense, I can use one set of fighter, one type of munition to take out that target and then meet my objective of disabling their IAD system.
We call that a critical node, right, sir?
That's what we do. Another tool that can be utilized to help figure out what type of targets to hit or how to quantify the value a target might have is to utilize a CARVER Matrix. As you can see on the slide, the CARVER Matrix breaks down on a point scale a target's value per se. How does the enemy see it? How quickly can it be? Is it critical? Is it accessible? Is it replaceable? How vulnerable? What effects would we get out of it? Is it a large effect or minimal effect? And then how much recognition? So for example, we're looking at an infrastructure, trying to hit a strategic infrastructure. So we're looking at potential targets of a water intake, a sanitation processor, and a power center. We've gone through the CARVER Matrix, assigned values under each category to what this target may be. Once we've filled in the matrix, we go down, we take a summation, and we can see that the sanitation processor provides a value of 18, meaning I should get the most impact out of this. So I'm going to maintain, or I'm going to dedicate more of my forces to strike this target versus striking the power center. As you can see.
So for this piece, sir, I just want to point out to the students that they already have sets of targets like the bridges or a headquarters building or whatever. So essentially this piece of analysis has already been done for you on AFEX when you're being told what you need to target. And all of this is very applicable because something like bombing a runway, we can bomb it just enough to kill the airplanes that are on the runway, or we can destroy the entire runway where nothing can take off. But that also means that we can't turn around and go reuse the runway for our own benefit if we need to have a forward staging ground. So understand that the reason why we're introducing, introducing this to you is not just because you will use it in AFEX, but when you're looking at your mission planning for VW, you can look at what the enemy's critical nodes are. And likewise, you can also start to assess what the enemy might see as your critical nodes when you're looking at your own force protection. Does that make sense, guys? Thank you, sir.
Absolutely does. So now taking that into account, we get to our tactical mission planning, and we're going to spend the majority of our time as the lower tier, the more ready to go accomplish the mission task planning. So when we look at our tactical, we're going to get this air tasking order, the ATO. It's going to be a schedule of events. It's how the war planners that are actively working at the CAOC are managing the battle space. We're going to look at that and start to identify, well, how do we support it? So first thing we're going to want to do is we're going to look at what is the enemy's order of battle, meaning what is their air defenses? What assets are they likely to use? What assets are located? So if there's an enemy airfield nearby, what type of fighters might they have stationed there, and what are the capabilities of the weapons? Do we know of any locations of critical nodes? Is there anything in particular, hospitals, targets? So we're trying to understand what is that battle space. This is where the intelligence piece comes in, where we're going to look at their various means of reporting via the between signals and intercepts, human intelligence, missions intercepts, and how all that will go to base, because it starts to build our situational awareness of the space we're working.
For the students to reference, that's what the whole point of that IPOE is, understanding what that battle space looks like and recognizing that some of this can be fluid. The enemy can have a fleet of 16 MiG-29s on one airfield, and then a day or so later, they can show up somewhere else. So we're constantly keeping an eye on this order of battle piece. It's very fluid.
Once you have an idea of the order of battle, now you have to start thinking about the how to go about attacking a target. So this is where now the weaponeering. So if I have a target, does it require a specific munition to take that out? Do I have an asset that can carry that specific target or that specific munition to attack that target? So now it's starting to look at, hey, how are we going? Now, target selection, as we talked about, will happen typically at that operational strategic level. But now this is I'm matching the right weapon, aircraft, and targets together. I'm not going to send an F-16 with an anti-radiation missile to hit a dam. I'm going to go send a bunker. I'm going to send a B-52 with a penetrating bomb munition, like a penetrating JDAM to target, or a bunker buster to target that. Once we've done that, we now start to think about this plan of execution. This is where now it comes into what resources do I have at hand? I need to utilize these resources along with their training, tactics, and procedures, TTPs, to their max effect. So the question is, what aircraft, weapons, what space assets do I have? How am I starting to match them towards my target sets? This goes into matching my strike packages, which you can think of those that are going to put the warhead on the forehead, and my support packages, my tankers, my logistics with the air mobility force, my AWACS aircraft that's providing battle space radar control. Additionally, I have to start looking at reviewing and applying the special instructions, commonly called as SPINs, which may include your SEER, your survival and escape and evasion resistance rules, as well as operational limits, such as if you're flying near a border of a friendly country, there might be specific rules that you have to follow to be able to operate that way, so that you don't fly into either a neutral airspace or put yourself in another threat. A real world allegory to this is flying in Afghanistan. There were times where you'd operate very close to the border of Pakistan or Iran. You'd be very careful, because flying over that internationally recognized border would have pretty dire international consequences. Could be as little as having to pay the Pakistani government a lot of money for our violation of their airspace, to go so far as they might utilize their air defense system to shoot down one of our assets. which then takes you into your final things of your contingency planning, the what ifs. And we'll get to that one here a little bit shortly. So let's look at the force packaging piece just to understand. So ideal force composition is what we're trying to do. We're trying to deny, degrade, defeat an enemy air defense. It's matching the right set of assets together, utilizing both joint and normal. So whether we have Navy or Marine participation in addition with ours, or international participation with their assets doing similar capabilities. The whole goal is the best utilization of a limited resource to try and achieve that maximum impact.
Sir, let's hold up here for a second. I really like this image. You have that B1 that's being supported by the tankers, and you do have all these fighters around it. So either of the tanker or the B1 is an extremely valuable asset to us, but themselves don't have air-to-air defensive capabilities, which means we're going to get these high-value assets to that area of operations, but we're going to support them. This is what you would call a combat air patrol or a CAP. This is making sure that those assets aren't sitting up there, basically like sitting ducks. This is a really good image to help illustrate what you should be doing in your AFEX game.
Now, one thing I'll point out just to kind of show is just even heighten in on that is you notice this F-16, that's an anti-radiation missile. So he's preparing to take out an enemy air defense. This F-15E model has a pair of heavy penetration bombs. This is a C model F-15, an air defense superiority fighter. We have our B-1, who's probably loaded with a large amount of similar type bombs or general purpose bombs. And you have the tanker that's giving them all the gas. Realize you see them in pairs. Two F-16s, they're probably likely wingmen. These two E models are likely wingmen, and these F-15s are likely wingmen. These aircraft are working together to, one, escort the package in to give that best success, but then to complement what they might encounter in the battle space. Moving on to the contingency planning is the planning for what ifs. What possible events could occur during our main mission plan? What happens if I have an aircraft that maintenance out and that can't generate? Do I have a spare? Do I have an alternate unit identified that could cover that assignment? What happens if we have weather, such as this large sandstorm you see blowing in to the country that's going to degrade my air operations at the field? What happens if my C-17 or C-5 does not arrive with the intended ordnance required? What if I don't have satellite coverage to confirm my BDA on time? Do I have another asset that could do that? What if it's approach?
Sir, this is relevant to them. BDA is battle damage assessment. That's part of when you guys pull up your requirements. It lets you know how successful you are in what you've targeted. So your guys' bridge will take several bombings to take it out. That's part of your BDA, your battle damage assessment.
So understanding and planning for that contingency, it lets you now start to think. It's just like we think about in the problem-solving tools that we've given you here at OTS. I'm observing, I'm orienting, I'm deciding, I'm acting. This is more, I have some time to plan it. So now I maybe am looking at an 8-step or a APTEC type tool as I'm planning, because we haven't quite gotten into the battle. We're just setting up how are we going to do the operation and what can I do? So it sets us up for that hopeful eventual success. Now, as we're going to put it all together, we got to think about this. We're going to try to establish our battle space. All right. Doing so, we're going to define a forward edge of the battle area. In AFEX, you'll have typically one may be the country borders. It could be with an area where we know we have air defense superiority, where we can freely operate. And hey, going past this line, now we have additional risk. We're going to define our known suspected threats. We're going to think about how are we going to put our defenders up? How are we going to keep the enemy from crossing that battle edge and coming to our area, trying to disrupt our operations? We're going to plan placement of our ISR and support. So where are we going to put our AWACS, our JSTARS, our tankers? And then we're going to think about now putting our force and strike package together. What is going to be our offensive counter air? Who's going to escort our strike package into the target? What target are we going to hit? So understanding these thoughts, let's start to build a battle space. So I have a legend on the side. It's just for reference following. So we talk about first, we defined where the forward edge of the battle is. Second, we put up what we know from our intel. So we have an enemy air defense plan right here. I have an airfield with at least 2 known enemy fighters. I have a target that's defended by what looks like an overlapping SAM, surface to air missile defense laydown, with an additional orange ring is an early warning radar system that's defended by the SAMs as well. Knowing this, I'm going to set up a blocking force of some CAPs, some combat air patrols, using my defensive counter air, using my F-15s. I'm going to set up my support and ISR packages using my own airborne early warning radar, my AWACS to the south, my JSARs to the north, to start looking across to see where are those enemy fighters. What are we seeing? Are we seeing any changes or differences in what we expected with our IADS defense? Then I'm going to establish where's my strike package and going to start to develop, what routing are we going to go with? Okay, so additionally, don't forget that we are fighting in a 3-dimensional world. So we still have space. Where's my satellite going to cover? Realize that while these are 2-dimensional images, those red SAM threats and the orange early warning are almost conical domes over that airspace that vary in their range. So you can defeat them either by altitude or maybe line of sight type issues. And we'll talk about that one here further. So now that we've defined our battle space, I want to put a tactical mission plan in action. So the first thing that we have to start thinking about is we've laid out our packages, and now I'm actually looking at how do I strike the orange and red triangle target that is being heavily defended by the enemy. Well, first, I'm going to have to send in a suppression of enemy air defenses strike package, a SEED mission, typically flown by F-16s with anti-radiation missiles and bombs. Their goal, after hitting maybe the support tankers to make sure they're full of fuel prior to beginning this mission, is to get in to try and find where's the most vulnerable SAM system. Well, these 2 SAM rings don't have a lot of overlap. So if I theoretically take them out, I should be able to open up a corridor to allow myself access to the airspace. Additionally, it puts us pretty close to where we can set up a target to hit their early defense warning radar and set up a blocking action to keep their fighters from coming in to attack our strike force as they go through. With that said, now our bombers have a way in. They have an ingress route. They're able to ingress in. They're defended from the bombers. They prosecute their target. Now, the one thing that commonly gets left out is people have to remember, how do I get out? I have to have a way out, because I can't just, we blew it up. Because now, if I try going left, you fly through the rings, I could lose aircraft, I could lose an asset. If my fighter cap doesn't work and these enemy fighters break through, I could still lose it. So I have to start thinking of those what ifs. Maybe I redirect one of my DCA caps to come in there to help set up a blocking through that corridor we made. Now, an interesting thing about this as we're setting up is we've got some technology that can work for us. We have stealth. Now, the quickest way just to think of stealth is that because of technology engineering, radar is a wave and it bounces and reflects in different ways. Stealth helps minimize that radar cross section. So in essence, it reduces how much an asset can be seen. Looking at our same battle space with a stealth asset, we can see that based off of the capabilities of these F-22 or the B-2 illustrated, this is now my threat laydown. I can still be seen if I fly into one of those rings under certain parameters, but it now makes it a little bit easier to start threading the needle and setting myself up for a strike. Additionally, with stealth, I might be able to hit the strike and get out before anybody really knows what's going on, because it's an unexpected quick hit. Now, we have to keep in mind that we are very limited on our stealth assets, so a loss of one of them would be a strategic disadvantage later on potentially. So keep that in mind as your planning goes. Ma'am, do you have anything else before we move forward?
No, I think that it's really important to recognize that if you were to toggle back and forth between this slide and the other slide, it is a concept that their ability to reach out and see you is just a little bit smaller. There you go, the big red circles versus the smaller red circles. They're still in the same location. It just does decrease their overlap. A huge system like a B2 coming in, instead of looking as big as as that aircraft actually is, it looks like something much smaller. So there's a little bit of confusion in the art of war with regard to this. And to that idea of being able to thread the needle and come right back out, that's an important tactic that we can exploit only because of this system and its low radar cross section.
Now, an interesting thing about tactical mission planning is not only is it useful for air war, it can be useful in other phases of our life, much like when we move on our program and head out for some expeditionary skills training out at the Vigilant Warrior site. You can also use tactical mission planning while here at the OTS campus.
Oh, sir, do tell us more about this.
So right now I have a flight who needs to get to the IDMT clinic. However, they're a little nervous about their customs and courtesies and warrior knowledge, and they know that chow time is a high threat risk environment. So as we can see, a forward edge of the battle area has been established. For some reason, this is still in the morning. They're getting ready for coming out after their dorm maintenance and personal hygiene time, and they're now making their attempt in. Well, first we have to understand, we know generally that MTIs and instructors patrol these certain areas. So one flight goes to start up a support orbit out over on the drill pad near Welch Field, start to kind of get some eyes on.
Hang on, sir.
Where
Slow
are
down
these?
for a second. These images are pretty small. All right, guys, he just put in 2 little orbits pretty much in the center of your imagery. And also up at the top left, you'll see 2 little triangles. Those are some flights that are actually trying to execute this mission. So follow along with him, and maybe he'll add in his cursor to show you where some of this movement's happening. There we go. Those are your orbits. They're providing intelligence. And these are our 2 teams that are trying to make their way over to the area where the IDMT is, which is that red and orange triangle.
So with that says, we now have an idea of where our threats are. We know the MTIs tend to patrol from the PCC down through the bomb run. We know we have some instructors walking some orbits, walking to and from either the Chow Hall or around the campus. Our initial DCA, defensive counter air, and our support asset are getting that recon because they're able to see the instructors. And now our strike package and escort are ready to move. So as they approach the forward edge of the battle area, our strike asset is going to be protected by our offensive counter air, who's going to proceed to neutralize instructor threat number 1 with impeccable execution of a warrior knowledge reciting excellent warrior knowledge. That instructor is so overwhelmed with the awesomeness of that warrior knowledge that he fills out a 341 for excellence and has to personally deliver it to their flight commander.
So good.
Additionally, our flight is going to use impeccable DCID, pacing movements, and proper calls to neutralize this MTI threat, who also will be turning in a 341 for excellence directly to their instructor. Now, with these threats open, we now have a corridor for an approach path in towards our target. So our strike force is going to continue forward while our OCA go and set up a blocking method to make sure that instructor threat number 2 is blocked from our strike force, who can then approach and make it to their target, the IDMT office, with minimal instructor intervention. Now, it sounds trivial, but it's the same process that we could ask, well, what if an MTI didn't fill out a 341 for excellence and leave their post to turn that in? Well, maybe a second plan is the flight does a second reattack and turns a different way to block and open up. I don't know. There's multiple options to see. But it just goes to show you that you can apply this. When you get to later on, like you saw in helps yesterday, you're going to be given tasks with some freedom of movement to maybe take a different approach path or follow a different set of ROEs. It might adjust how you tactically apply your problem solving tools.
Now that is a real thing also. It's called dynamic retasking. So if actually to go back into that picture, sir, with the OTS campus, if you were to get just outside of the DFAC where that little pad is that you guys all wait outside of, and all of a sudden the flight decides, you know what, we really could just break out and start running and go towards the Ritchie Center and around that MTI and back down towards the IDMT, they would call ahead and get authorization for that dynamic retasking. And something like that absolutely could happen. So think about some of the, that would be a contingency, right? If that MTI were still blocking that area. When we were talking about those contingency plans, almost all routes are directly planned out. However, if something shows up that wasn't there yesterday, and SA-15 is a mobile tracked unit, integrated air defense, it can move. And if it's suddenly pinging your aircraft, hey, it's in the area, and you're like, I want to avoid this threat, then yes, you may have to call back and what's called dynamic retasking. So you don't have to be concrete in some of this stuff. You guys could have a really good plan, but you should also have a really workable and mitigatable contingency plan.
So in summary, this is just a very brief level of understanding of what is tactical planning. It's a useful tool that you can use here. Realize that there are doctrine documents that go well into the graduate level of understanding of how to do this. This is just scratching the surface of what you can initially expect when you're trying to go in there. This will be helpful to you as you're developing your plan for AFEX, so that when you give your brief, you plan your IPOE, you understand your battle space, you start anticipating, hey, here's how we plan to prosecute our plan. And if the plan doesn't go according, how do we then have a pocket plan to recover and continue the mission? So we talked about how the Air Force planning cycle works, how we have the 3 levels, the strategic, operational, and tactical. We dove into a quick understanding of how targets are selected between the strategic and operational, as well as started to put it all together with how tactical mission planning comes together to meet the intent of desired effect with our resource utilization.
So to close this out, I'm really excited for you guys to execute this at AFEX. And remember that as the AFEX crew commander, your job is to make sure that a lot of this is being executed all simultaneously. So if you're watching any one particular route that's being done, you're too much at the tactical level, and I need you to pull yourself out and assign that to the roles of the actual OCA and DCA, and making sure that you're kind of recognizing we showed you one mission inside the battle space. Your battle space is multiple missions going on all at the same time. So if you take this into account when you guys are briefing us with your SMEAC presentation, that's your situation, mission, execution, administration, and comm, we expect you to do wonderfully. So if that's what you're wondering about with regard to what to expect at AFEX, you could actually plan a really bad battle. But if you know what you're doing with regard to the planning side of things and you execute that and you communicate with your people, you probably will still pass your actual AFEX LE itself. All right, I think we're going to close that out. It doesn't look like we have any questions from just so you guys know, OT Vanderpool was on with us observing this, and he has no questions, and he is really excited to watch you guys execute. So with that, sir, thank you very much for a very, very well put together presentation. We are signing off.
Good luck, fair skies and tailwinds.